Jane Foster. People want to be asked, do you want to read Bruce Banner? If you're reading Hope, you're reading Amadeus Cho Hope. That's the biggest issue that people have. They feel like they're being forced into a situation that they don't want to be in. And if people have the option of either reading something they enjoy or reading something they don't enjoy, they'll choose what they enjoy. But if what they enjoy isn't available, they won't choose anything and they'll walk away. And that's the biggest issue that people are facing. So the Empire initially opens up with the most logical thing, which is indoctrinating kids. And that's one of the interesting scenarios here, is because when it comes to taking over any one particular country, it's all about indoctrination. It's all about going to people and saying, hey, take this as an absolute fact and do not ask why. Again, it's one of these things that you kind of see, and that's the purpose of the here, is to create relatability, but to also show us how far it can go. Because in order for society to be successful, there has to be critical thinking. There has to be people who say, but why? That has to happen.
Up there. Tracking target.
And if they give them an answer that requires critical thinking, then the question becomes, well, then how did you arrive at that answer? And that leads into a whole process, and that leads into more questions being asked, and it leads to the idea of people just not accepting something as absolute truth, and actually asking questions about why things are the way they are. And that's one of the things I enjoyed most about this little segment, is it's basically this notion of you can take something as an absolute truth. Because what had happened, once Hydra took over, Hydra eliminated all forms of text that they didn't agree with. That was another aspect of totalitarian and fascist policies. If you disagree with a book, burn it. But in the end, they weren't really just burning a book, they were burning the ideology of critical thinking. They were burning the ideology of saying, I don't agree with this, but I also have to accept that there are opinions out there different from my own. It's more or less kind of purporting this idea of anybody who doesn't think the way that I do is wrong. And so again, that's why this is so significant, is because that's effectively what Hydra's doing. Hydra's really just kind of coming along and saying, okay guys, look, like we now run the show, which means that kids read the books that we tell them to read, teachers teach what we tell them to teach, the news reports what we tell it to report. It's very much a totalitarian regime. Dissent, differing opinions, people who don't see the world the same way that Hydra does, all those people are ousted. They're ostracized by society or they're eliminated in their entirety. So again, it's one of these scenarios where it's a very slippery slope. The fact remains, there's actually one of the kids in this class who reports on an Inhuman, reports on, I think it's like the older brother of one of these kids, and basically saying, look, I saw him doing something kind of weird, only for us to find out that, this kid's brother had basically swallowed a Captain America lunchbox in order to get it for his, younger brother, and then basically was sought after by the cops, more or less Hydra's society. Again, this is designed to show us how bad things have gotten, just because of the fact that in this particular scenario, Inhumans are being arrested if they haven't registered themselves. And that's kind of an interesting scenario, because again, it's creating this idea of individuals who effectively intern, and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, because what some people are sort of forced to do, assuming that they actually choose to read the story, is they're kind of forced to realize that there are uncomfortable truths out there. But the idea isn't to ignore uncomfortable truths. The idea is to embrace them and ask, why do they make me uncomfortable in the first place? Again, really feeding into this idea of critical thinking, feeding into this idea of maybe I should just ask why, as opposed to just kind of accepting things as an absolute truth. And so one of the other aspects on this is the idea of the superheroes who are just kind of left out in space. Keep in mind, when Captain America initially launched his and began the process of taking over the United States, the shield that Carol Danvers had worked on, the shield that was designed to keep threats outside of Earth, was enacted. Captain Marvel and a handful of other people out there who were superpowered beings were basically forced outside of the shield. Now, remember, the reason why this happens is because it would not have done Earth any good if they were like, hey, here's this shield that can protect our planet from everything except for like really powerful people, because the really powerful things that are out there are the ones you worry about. You worry about the Galactus, you worry about Thanos, you worry about Gladiator, the Shi'ar Empire trying to obliterate the whole of humanity. The shield is designed to keep out some of the most powerful beings in existence. And so there's really no hope for Carol Danvers or any of their guys to actually get back onto Earth proper. So that means that Hyperion, it means that Blue Marvel, it means that Carol Danvers herself, it means that a lot of these characters who are out there trying to spin off this tide of Chitauri forces that are constantly invading Earth, or at least constantly trying to invade Earth in order to get their queen, will ultimately lead to them presumably dying in combat. Now, one of the questions that has to be asked here, this is one of the things that kind of stood out to me, is that if this shield is capable of keeping out some of the most powerful beings in the world, and the Chitauri are a race of aliens akin to insects without any insane powers whatsoever, then why don't the forces of Carol Danvers and those guys just leave go get help somewhere while the Chitauri forces constantly just bombard themselves onto the shield and are inevitably killed each and every time. In truth, it's just Nick Spencer keeping them there. It's just a way for writer Nick Spencer to say, hey, look, we're keeping them around. We want them around here, presumably for this great big huge grand poobah conflict that takes place at the end of everything. And so from this point, what we do is we actually pick up with a kid named Ray Sean, and we actually join the Champions. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and this is why this is really kind of cool, is because of the fact that this is designed to show us, or at least give us an indication, that the superheroes are really on the run. I mean, there's really no hope. Now, we'll find out how hopeless a lot of them perceive things to be here in a little while. But at the moment, when this kid, Ray Sean, is basically rescued by the Champions, so by Miles Morales and by Viv, the daughter of Vision, and by Amadeus Cho-Hulk and so on and so forth, where he's whisked away, we actually pick up in Denver with some giant monster that's, wreaking havoc. Well, this is not anything new, and really, we're not even given the origin of this monster, and we don't have to worry about it. This is one of those things where Nick Spencer kind of plays it fast and loose with the old school Marvel style of storytelling. And what I mean by that is back during the 1960s and the early 1970s, back when Marvel was coming out with a lot of new superheroes, you really didn't see a lot of big crossover conflict events like you do now. Instead, the way Stan Lee and a lot of the earlier writers, Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway and Steve Englehart, the way they used to write those stories back then is while they weren't the most lighthearted, they were a lot lighthearted than they are now. And so you would see, Captain America fighting off against like the Snake Monster, or you would see Thor against like the Molten Man, or something along those lines. But you wouldn't see like these great big huge grandiose things. And so it's really kind of hitting at this idea that there's still various threats out there. The difference is how they're dealt with. When it came to the traditional landscape of Avengers, they wouldn't normally obliterate these things. Sometimes they would, if the monster just couldn't be reasoned with, if it was like a very primal intelligence, they couldn't understand speech patterns or anything like that, or if it was just such a violent being that there was no way to defeat it outside of killing it, then sure, they would fall to that level. But for the most part, it was always like contain, capture, and then hold a prisoner. In this instance, that doesn't happen. Instead, the Hydra Avengers jump in and just kill the thing. Now, one of the things that I want to address here are some of the members of the Avengers. The Deadpool is straightforward. It's all about cash. When it comes to Superior Spider-Man, or I guess the return of Superior Spider-Man, is more or less just the idea of, being on the devil's right hand and in his path. The same thing with Odin's son. Now, there is a little bit more to Odin's son than we'll actually find out. We'll really get around to issue number 4 or 5, and we'll actually find out there's a lot going on with this character that we're not being made aware of. But remember, Scarlet Witch has been corrupted, although we don't know how yet. Well, at least we don't know how in issue number 1. In issue number 4, we find out, and we can spoil this a little bit. I mean, it's not a great big huge revelation. It's literally just like a one-panel thing that shows us. But with the Scarlet Witch, she's basically been corrupted by a being named Chthon. Chthon was the being that gave her powers in the first place, or at least, I guess, established a lot of the abilities that she's currently capable of. The problem with this was that with the character of Scarlet Witch, it was always this ongoing battle to keep Chthon at bay, much the same way that Doctor Strange tries to keep, like, Dormammu at bay. The issue is that we don't really know how, but somewhere along the line, the Scarlet Witch's ability to fight off the essence of Chthon was basically hampered or eliminated in its entirety, and Chthon has totally taken over the body of Scarlet Witch. So, in truth, while this is Scarlet Witch, it's not really Wanda Maximoff controlling her, it's Chthon controlling her, which this is actually kind of cool, because what it does is it creates a redemption element for Wanda Maximoff herself, which could actually tell some pretty compelling stories. At the same time, where these guys are basically rounded up pretty fast, where they defeat this monster pretty fast, what we do is we actually pick up with this pretty interesting revelation in the sense that while there is a lot of fascist things taking place, the idea that Inhumans are rounded up if they refuse to register, there's also that the country's better off than it was before. And again, this kind of creates a little bit of a false corollary in the sense that can a country really be better off under a totalitarian regime? And the answer is yes, it actually can. Countries are nothing more than a byproduct of power, and the people who try to keep that power from corrupting everything, the people versus the super rich, as they call it. But the idea here is that with a singular person or council running the show, restricting freedom from everybody, then the emphasis or the issue doesn't necessarily become people have the free will to like buy homes they can't afford and things like that. Instead, they will walk where we tell them to, they will do what we tell them to, or at least a large enough majority will that you don't really have to worry about it. And then from there, it's a matter of how do we keep them under control? And that is the genius of this. It would have been very easy for Captain America and his forces to implement this policy where there's just like tanks in the streets every day, cops stationed outside people's houses, and they follow them everywhere they go. But they don't do that. Instead, what they do is they say, what we need is to give people a reason to want us to stay. It's not enough for us to take over. We have to give them a reason to cheer for us. And so by eliminating monsters, by creating shovel-ready jobs and improving the employment levels, by creating a more stable economy, that's how they keep people there. By creating these peace accords, by bringing conflict to an end between the United States and various other territories that are out there. That's how all that ends up happening. They basically say, look, we've made the country almost infinitely better. And so ultimately, it all ends up coming down on the shoulders of the people. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to make the world a better place? Are you willing to give up your freedom to make the country better? For a lot of people, the answer is no. You asking that question, and without a second guess, the answer is nope, absolutely not. They refuse to give that up. In their mind, and in the minds of a lot of people, it's I'd rather live in a free society that destroys itself using its own freedom than have a long life in a totalitarian society. Because what happens when that council that does everything that benefits society as a whole becomes a council that decides to tear society down? They become evil, they become corrupt, they become crooked. Well, then suddenly we have no choice. We don't have the ability to do anything. And that's the argument that they make, because while things are down and out in a free society, while they're not necessarily the greatest thing ever, the freedom that that society has allows them to make it better. That's the difference, is that ultimately it all comes down on the shoulders of the people and what they're willing to do, how they're willing to make things work in order to make them better. I mean, the civil rights movement happened to a degree with regards to government regulation in terms of new laws being passed and so on and so forth, but it wasn't soldiers in the streets marching on behalf of African Americans and multiple cultures that were out there. Instead, it was the American people that were marching out of the streets. It was the American people making their voices heard. When it comes to, the whole idea of Marvel's shift to bring back a lot of the older characters that people wanted to see return, it wasn't government policy that made that happen. It was people who were saying, I'm not going to read what you're putting out until you bring back the characters that I want to see. It's ultimately the people that make those things happen. And so that's one of the other benefits of the story, is because it shows us that at the end of the day, it all comes down on the shoulders of people doing the right thing, or doing what they believe to be right to make society a better place that ultimately keeps it better for the long haul. So again, it's really kind of a cool scenario here. One of the other things that really hits on here is the idea of what's going on with the X-Men. All we're really told here is that there's this sort of treaty between Hydra and the X-Men, in the sense that the X-Men are given their own autonomy. They're given their own section of the country where no one's allowed to affect them. It's one of those you stay away, I stay away kind of things. And that makes sense. When it comes to Marvel Comics, Marvel's really been given the X-Men kind of the crap end of the stick. And so it's one way to kind of smooth things over with regards to the fan base, in terms of okay, look, you guys don't want the humans, we won't really get to we won't punish the X-Men for being the X-Men. We're not going to make them the butt of all the heinous experiences of Hydra. Instead, we'll just have them kind of off and going. Within the realm of Marvel Comics, some of the most powerful beings that exist on the face of the planet are mutants. And so, I mean, if you're Hydra and you're running the show, do you really want somebody who can warp reality screwing it all up for you? Do you really want to piss off a guy who can transmit matter on the atomic scale just by looking at it? Is that really a guy that you want against you, or is that a guy that you want either neutral or on your side? And so again, it just kind of makes good sense with regards to the role that Hydra's taking. But with regards to the whole idea of the traditional superheroes themselves, the Avengers as we normally think of them, what we end up doing is, of course, we pick up with Ray Shawn and the Champions once they arrive back at the old Avengers, or I guess the new Avengers headquarters, kind of this whole abandoned bunker where Hydra wouldn't really look for them or anything like that. But we end up finding out that things are actually pretty bad. Things are on the pretty down and out, just because of the fact that Ray Shawn actually shows up alongside the Champions, who have just kind of made this, grabbed this kid and then just brought him over. But once he says, look, I have some information that was handed to me by a guy by the name of Rick Jones, don't really know who he is, but he told me to give it to you guys because you can win the war. The Avengers send him off to meet Tony Stark. Now, the reason why is because of the fact that, remember, Rick Jones was the guy who leaked all the information about Pleasant Hill, the scenario where S.H.I.E.L.D. was using a cosmic cube to manipulate the reality around it and trick all the villains into thinking that they were kind of living in this idyllic paradise. And so, because of the fact that Rick Jones was basically forced into S.H.I.E.L.D. custody after the event of Pleasant Hill, in lieu of serving a prison sentence, he was able to gain access to all kinds of information, especially after Hydra had taken over S.H.I.E.L.D. and the United States. And so what he had done is he had grabbed all these little bits and pieces of information, consolidated them into a single thumb drive, gave it to Ray Shawn, and then sent Ray Shawn on his way to go meet the Avengers. And so during his conversation with Tony Stark, it's actually kind of an interesting scenario, because Tony Stark's usually always the futurist, the idealist. He's always thinking one step ahead, or 2 steps ahead, or 20 steps ahead, or something like that. But in this instance, Tony Stark has basically given up. Now, the reason why this is kind of cool is because there's always been this sort of antithesis between Tony Stark and Captain America. They represent yins and yangs. They're always opposites. And it has been since Civil War. Civil War for Captain America and Iron Man was The Dark Knight Returns for Batman and Superman. It was the seminal story that basically established that they're always going to bump heads forever. They're never going to agree on anything in an absolute way. And so much like the original Age of Ultron story, where Ultron had basically taken over the world, and Captain America had effectively given up until he came up with an idea to go find one of Nick Fury's bunkers. Tony Stark's much the same way. He's like, look, we can't fight, man. All we can do is just hide. We can just live from one day to the next,
Buddy,
do the best
help.
we can, and then just call it quits. Just go on for as long as we can until Hydra catches us or something along those lines. And so again, it's kind of an interesting scenario because what it tells us is that while some people have given up, others haven't. And the reason why is because of the fact that we end up learning that with this whole scenario of Steve Rogers more or less being a Hydra agent, during a meeting or I guess a dinner that he has with Sharon Carter, there's still a little bit of humanity left in him. And that's one of the reasons why this is so interesting is because when it comes to Captain America, he's not wholly evil, right? Like he's not inherently evil, like, yes, I am like Vlad the Impaler and I'm just going to like kill everybody or something like that. It's nothing along those lines. For him, it's really more about the idea of he genuinely thinks that he's doing the right thing. He genuinely believes that he's actually making the country a better place, which in a lot of ways he is, minus those individuals who are being tortured or executed. It's the whole idea of he's genuinely trying to make the country a better place. And so because of that, what he ends up doing, or at least when he's talking to Sharon Carter, is of course this basically told us that Rick Jones had been captured following his leaking of all this information to Ray Sean, which eventually made its way to the Avengers, and in an attempt to demonstrate that he's still the Steve Rogers that Sharon Carter knows, or at least in the sense that he still has some shred of humanity, she actually asked him to let Rick Jones live, to basically spare his life. Because remember, he is basically in sentence for execution. He's going to be killed. And so the coolest thing about this actually comes directly from Rick Jones himself. And the reason why is because he's the guy who just will not give up. Captain America gives him an option that said, look, all you have to do is say, Hail Hydra. That's all you have to do. All you have to do is just say, Hail Hydra, and you'll go free. Now, this seems like a small thing, right? Like it seems like a tiny little thing. Like all you have to do is say Hail Hydra. But it's the idea behind it. It's everything that it stands for. Saying Hail Hydra means Hail Hydra. It's a couple of words. The words in and of themselves don't necessarily mean anything. It's the meaning behind them that has all the significance. If Rick Jones says Hail Hydra, then it means that he's effectively given up. That he said, okay, look, I guess Hydra really has won. But so long as he does not say Hail Hydra, it means that Hydra can be defeated. There's at least one person out there, even if he's moments away from being killed, who still believes that Hydra's not right, who still believes that Hydra can fall. Not only that, because of the fact that a lot of people are aware that Rick Jones basically leaked all this information out regarding Pleasant Hill, that he's the one that basically was able to attain the information and send it over to the Avengers. The Avengers themselves now see him as something of a martyr. And so where he's told all you have to do is say Hail Hydra and you'll live, instead he responds, Avengers assemble. And the reason why this is so important is because of the fact that now he's a martyr. Now he's the cause. Now it's, if we do this, we got to do it for Rick Jones and the other people like him. His name will always come up. He's going to be a champion of the rebel effort in order to overthrow Hydra proper. So that's why this is so interesting. And so ultimately we pick up with Madam Hydra herself. Again, the reason why is because of the fact that we're actually going to learn there's a lot more about her than is initially depicted here. But she was the one that had come along when Steve Rogers was a little kid and recruited him into Hydra in the first place alongside his mom. And so the question or the issue that Captain America faces right now is, on one hand, with regards to Rick Jones, he's doing what needs to be done. But on the other hand, Rick Jones stands for something much larger. These little rebel excursions, these little attempts to tear down Hydra, these guerrilla warfare tactics, all stem from the idea that there are still people out there who believe that Hydra's wrong, that Hydra can be taken down. And so what ends up happening is this inner circle, Kraken, Dr. Faustus, Hive, Arnim Zola, these different guys all basically say, the only thing that we can do here is we've got to crack down even harder. We've got to make things even tougher. We have to show them that if they cross us, that we are going to execute them, we're going to destroy everything they know and love. And so Captain America is kind of torn here just because of the fact that if he gives in to Hydra, to the Hydra Council and says, yes, you're right, it makes them look weak. But if he doesn't give in, then it makes it look like he's weak on, people who are basically being rebels. It's a no-win situation. And so ultimately what he does is he takes his hand out of the equation in its entirety. He gives the authority to Madam Hydra, to Eliza, to basically go through and implement the act that's going to show the strength of Hydra in the face of those who would attempt to challenge Hydra's leadership. And so when the Avengers all gather outside of Las Vegas to see what in the world's going on, Hydra emerges with their massive warships and begins leveling the entire city. They destroy the entirety of Las Vegas, Nevada. Alright, so getting into Secret Empire Part 2, God, this story just gets better and better. I mean, this story is absolutely phenomenal. I feel like it's one of the best stories that's really come out with Captain America in a long time. But again, this really picks up with the aftermath of the destruction of Las Vegas. Now, keep in mind, for the superhero community, they've been holding on by a thread, right? And that's the significance of Secret Empire. That's the basis behind Secret Empire. And Secret Empire, I imagine, on some level, is supposed to be political. It's supposed to be like a reflection of the modern day politics. I don't worry about that side of it. I just want to enjoy the story for what it is. And the idea of superheroes basically being pushed to the point that they feel like they just literally can't win is very indicative of Old Man Logan, of this just dark atmosphere, this dark future where things are just grim and nobody can really come back from it anymore, specifically in the realm of New York. Keep in mind, we saw in the free comic book day version in Secret Empire #0 that New York was just kind of sucked into the dark realm, so because of that, there's no light here. I mean, it's just this dimension where there's nothing but darkness, and the darkness is permeated by these monsters that see nothing more than to kill anything they come across. And so all these inhabitants of New York City have just kind of descended into absolute madness. And this is where things get absolutely beautiful, because we initially pick up with really just kind of a handful of those individuals, those heroes that were in New York at the time, that it was whisked away. So Doctor Strange, Iron Fist, Luke Cage, and so on and so forth. And it's really kind of cool because it gives these minor heroes a chance to shine. I mean, as cool as Luke Cage is, as cool as Iron Fist is, at the end of the day, they're still pretty low on the totem pole when it comes to like the hierarchy of popular heroes in the realm of Marvel Comics. Honestly, Netflix, whether people loved it or hated it, Netflix shined a lot of light on the character of Iron Fist, where previously people didn't even know who he was. So again, it was really kind of an interesting concept, but it really also shines a lot of light, no pun intended, on the character of Dagger, because remember, Dagger has the ability to create these sort of psychic hard-light constructs, so to speak, but she's basically the only source of light in this dimension of darkness. The reason why is because of the fact that for the character of Doctor Strange, his efforts are almost always on trying to get them out of there, and so he really can't exhaust all of his energies. Instead, Dagger serves as the perfect beacon, as the perfect source of light for anybody who's trying to make their way throughout this city. But the issue with this is that where initially she was able to extend this power for hours and hours and hours, and for days on end, is taking this, psychological toll. Her body's perfectly fine, but the idea of standing at the top of the Empire State Building and just emitting herself as a beacon of light for hours on end is psychologically taxing. And that's one of the great things about Secret Empires, because it's more than just superheroes fighting superheroes. It's more than just good guys versus bad guys. It's the psychological effect that this has on heroes being put in such weird and strange situations. Not only that, it actually allows villains to shine in a way that they normally never would. And the reason why this happens is because of the fact that we actually pick up with the church. And there's a handful of criminals that kind of break into this church just because of the fact that this church is getting resources in the form of medicine and things along those lines. And where some of these villains break in with the intention of robbing this priest, a guy suddenly shows up, kills one of the criminals, and begins going on this amazing monologue. He basically says, why are you here? And the idea is, well, we're getting what we want. We were going to give you, you're kind of the prophets, all that kind of good stuff. But then it's basically revealed to be the Kingpin. And the idea here is that the Kingpin really plays this incredible role. It's almost indicative of the Kingpin from the Netflix Daredevil series, which I love. Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. I think he's really one of the best villains that Marvel's ever had in the history of their Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think he's probably the standout villain. But the idea here is that he plays very much the role that we're used to. If you're not familiar with Kingpin, for you, he's probably just a foe of Spider-Man, a foe of Daredevil, and that's really about it. But when writers actually take to task and write him as a great villain, he is something to behold. He is just beautifully done in this particular story. And the reason why is because of the fact that he basically kills these criminals, and he tells the priest, your church is under my protection now. I will make sure that you want for nothing. If you need medicine, I will give you the medicine you need. If you need food, I will give you the food that you need. If you need water, if you need any kind of resources, I will be there to give it to you. But when everything comes back to normal, we get back to the normal state of things, keep in mind who it was that kept you alive. Now, this is how Wilson Fisk works in a lot of different ways. Wilson Fisk, in a lot of instances, will just strong arm his way into stuff, right? Like he'll just show up and just be like, and this is mine now. But in some instances, he'll just kind of work his way in, and he'll intertwine himself into these particular scenarios, and then basically start calling in favors later on down the line. But what this also does is it creates a measure of loyalty. It's really some people, in this instance, who will look at Kingpin and say, well, he's not nearly as bad as I thought he was. I mean, he helped to keep us alive. He made sure that we had the resources that we need. He kept bandits and criminals away from us. I mean, we don't really owe him so much as we respect him in the way that we're going to make sure that we uphold our end of the bargain, that we treat him with this measure of respect. And so it really turns into something akin to affection, more so than like loyalty or the belief that he somehow owed something. And so because of this, we kind of transition out of this dark realm and we actually pick up with Tony Stark himself. Now again, one of the cool things about Secret Empire is it very much picks up on the state of the Marvel Universe at this point in time. And coming out of Civil War II, regardless of, whether you love him or hate him, Tony Stark was just one half of the argument with Carol Danvers on the character of Ulysses. Again, I have that Civil War II video down in the description. We're not going to go too far into it. Civil War II is not a very good story. But the idea here is that Tony Stark made his own enemies among the superhero community. But the events of Secret Empire do not distinguish which side anybody was on. It's not like Captain America said, okay, I'm taking sides and we're going to start splitting people up. So the people who are going to be, siding with Tony Stark or who are going to be stuck with Tony Stark are going to be the same ones who supported him during the events of Civil War II. It's not like that. When the events of Secret Empire popped off and Captain America made his move and he started just checkmate after checkmate after checkmate and shutting down all these different superhero groups, just eradicating them or imprisoning them or whatever the case may be, it ultimately meant that it was just superheroes scattering for the winds and hiding as best they could. And so what it meant is that at that point, following the events of Civil War II, Tony Stark, in a lot of ways, was surrounded by enemies. This is also compounded by the fact of just Tony Stark's history. Superior Iron Man, where he was just an absolute dick to everybody. His history of alcoholism, his actions during the first Civil War. Tony Stark has consistently made enemies among the superhero community on a lot of different instances. And so because of that, a lot of those enemies really haven't let those issues go. They haven't really walked away and said, yeah, bygones be bygones. It doesn't really work that way. For a lot of people, they still absolutely hate him. And so what he does is he basically kind of calls this truce. And he says, okay, look, guys, I know a lot of you guys don't believe me. I know a lot of you guys don't really think that I'm a guy who's trustworthy. That's fine. Let's let Rick Jones speak. And of course, Rick Jones recorded this message, before he had died. But the cool thing about this is that Rick Jones is positioned as this one guy that everybody trusts because he was the last guy to shout Avengers Assemble. He was the one guy who wouldn't give ground, who wouldn't give up, who wouldn't walk away from the idea of what it meant to be a superhero. And so the result of this is that what Rick Jones basically does is get us caught up on everything that had happened so far. That, S.H.I.E.L.D. was messing around with recreating a cosmic cube. The cosmic cube was just a fragment, or I guess a combination of different fragments from other cosmic cubes. The result was that one of these fragments belonged to a cosmic cube that the Red Skull had previously attained. When the cosmic cube was reformed and the whole Pleasant Hill event kicked off and all that kind of good stuff, and the Avengers and the media became aware of the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. was basically tricking the minds of different villains into believing that they were in a paradise when they really weren't. When the Assault on Pleasant Hill event took place, and Comic had basically gone through and began the process of de-aging Steve Rogers and changing his entire backstory at the whims of the Red Skull, then ultimately it set all these events in motion that allowed Captain America to operate behind the scenes without anybody ever knowing he was a Hydra agent in the first place. Now the kicker to this is that where Comic had eventually gone on to join the Thunderbolts under Bucky Barnes, this led to a direct conflict between Captain America and Bucky Barnes. Captain America killed Bucky Barnes. He also killed the Red Skull. And then in turn, Eric Selvig, the guy who was basically the science head next to Captain America working alongside of him, basically dispersed the shards of the Cosmic Cube all across the world. Just because of the fact that the idea was that Captain America was going to take this Cosmic Cube and make Hydra a reality. That is to say, alter the very fabric of reality itself so that Hydra was in charge of everything. It was basically going to speed boost his way all the way up to the top. And so the result is that with these shards kind of scattered all throughout the world, now it's a hunt for the shards of the Cosmic Cube. It's almost akin to Dragon Ball Z and the Dragon Balls. Everybody's hunting for these shards of the Cosmic Cube. The result is that where Tony Stark and his forces, in the midst of mustering themselves together in order to race off and achieve this goal, Captain America is doing the exact same thing. Remember, Steve Rogers is none too happy about the idea that he had to display this extreme show of force by wiping out Las Vegas. But it was necessary for him to do that, or at least for him to order it done, for the very purpose of showing the fact that he's willing to do whatever it takes in order to make sure that Hydra stays in control. Now, the other half of this is, remember, Baron Zemo is like his man in the corner. I mean, this is his right-hand man. Baron Zemo will basically carry out virtually any task that Captain America asks him to. And that's why Captain America goes to Baron Zemo and says, I want you to track down the shards of the Cosmic Cube. I want you to leave no stone unturned. None. Do whatever you have to, kill whoever you have to, but do what needs to be done and get me this shard of the Cosmic Cube. Now, the other half of this is that we actually pick up about 24 hours after all this in Colorado. And the reason why is because of the fact that Natasha Romanoff had basically raced off with the intention of both, grabbing these shards and at the same time trying to track down and kill Captain America. The issue with this is that she's eventually located by the champions themselves. This is really cool because the champions basically go to her and say, look, you have a level of training that we couldn't even begin to comprehend. And that's that's true. With Natasha Romanoff, she's got no powers, but she does have prodigious training when it comes to espionage. I mean, she's really the world's greatest assassin. And so because of that, the champion's going to her is basically saying, look, we need you to train us in a way that we've never been trained before. We've been trained to defend. We've been trained to stop threats. What we need is training on how to kill threats. And this, again, is designed to show us that there's just this tipping point, this point at which everything just kind of switches. That it's not necessarily the superhero landscape that we're used to anymore, that things have gotten darker, things have gotten grittier. More so than that, things have gotten desperate for the superhero community. And so because of this, what ends up happening here is we basically have Natasha Romanoff simply saying, welcome to the Red Room. That's what we're going to do. We're basically going to switch over to this idea that I'm going to train you in the exact same way that I was trained. So it's really kind of a cool concept. But in the midst of all this, what we do is we actually switch to this weird location, this weird place, which we now know as the Vanishing Point. But the idea here is that there's just some chick just kind of running for her life. You guys will notice the art style is distinctly different. This girl's running for her life, right? Just kind of fleeing these weird things. It looks like members of the Serpent Society or what have you. Once they actually descend on her and they intend to kill her, these guys are all defeated by some unnamed person. But when this person is addressed by this woman, when she asks, who are you and what do you want? This man simply answers by saying, my name is Steve Rogers and I'm just trying to get home. Comic book fans, members of the Rob Corps, and people who stumbled across this video. Man, I left you guys on one heck of a cliffhanger last week. Man, you should have seen those comments. People were like, no! No! It was hilarious. But if you thought that cliffhanger was bad, man, wait till you see what we do at the end of this video. Man, anyway, so Secret Empire. All right, to me, there's two kinds of comic book stories. There's good comic book stories, ones where you're just like, oh, yeah, this is kind of cool, and then there's like amazing comic book stories. I don't really consider there to be like bad comic book stories because everybody's got something that they enjoy about one story for the most part. Like, I know people who hated Spider-Man Clone Saga, and I know people who loved it. So there's no absolute truth when it comes to stories. That's why I say there's good and then there's amazing. But in the last video, when we did Secret Empire number 2, we had basically run over this idea that Captain America, I guess, Hydra Captain America, Steve Rogers, was basically consolidating his power. He was, trying to figure out how to be an effective leader of Hydra while dealing with the politics of it all. Because there were members of the Hydra Council who were basically saying, hey, look, you have to make an example of the various superheroes out there. There's some that you just have to kill. Whereas Steve Rogers said, look, if we start killing off everybody, then the general public will turn against us. And that was the beauty of it all. That was the beauty of the whole thing. It was walking this very tight line. Steve Rogers has always historically been extremely good when it came to tactics. Whatever the case may be, he always knew the right direction to go in order to effectively win, or at least try his best to win. And he was really good at rallying people to his cause. And when he basically, his whole past was rewritten and he effectively became a Hydra agent, or at least that seemed to be the case, the idea was that when they came to power, they said, okay, look, there are things that we can do. We can curb, what it is that people can and can't do. But we have to give them the illusion that they stand some measure of success. And that was the reason why the internet was maintained, even with Captain America as the head of Hydra, and Hydra being this, fascist dictatorship that was basically running the show. Let the people have the internet. If the people have the internet, they'll have their own little groups and their own little organizations, and they'll have their little, guerrilla warfare tactics, and they'll be stopped occasionally. But you let them go through with their plans, they won't actually do anything. They can launch these, little battle tactics and so on and so forth. They can take out a few Hydra forces here and there, but in the end, it's one step forward, two steps back. They just don't know that it's happening. That's the goal. Give people the illusion that they're succeeding, and they'll keep on fighting, and basically you'll be able to maintain your own empire. So again, it's really genius in terms of how it all unfolds. But what this ends up doing is this jumps back to the idea of the whole vanishing point. That's really the only indication we've been given of what this place is. And this is where we left off on the last video, because we have Hydra Captain America, who's basically dominating the entire United States. And then suddenly we have this place off somewhere that looks like a fantasy land where we've got another version of Steve Rogers. We don't know who this Steve Rogers is. We know nothing about this guy. All he knows is he says, my name is Steve Rogers and I'm trying to get back home. Now, of course, this coincided with the arrival of just some girl. We're not given this girl's name. We're not given, her relevance, her significance. What's important here is that she's there to basically juxtapose this version of Steve Rogers with the version of Steve Rogers that we've seen before, the one that's currently running Hydra. And the reason why is because of the fact that Captain America as a concept is not lost on writer Nick Spencer. The whole idea of Captain America is that he's an ideology. He is a perspective. He's a viewpoint. He stands for something greater than just a guy with a shield dressed in the American flag running around fighting on the side of freedom. That's the whole nature of this. Is it's designed to show us that this is basically the Steve Rogers that we all know. And the reason why why we get this is because this girl simply asked, do you remember how you got here? Do you know what's going on? Do you know what this place is? Steve Rogers' response is, no, he has no clue what this is. The only thing he recalls are the basics, his military training. And that's the only explanation we need, that this is the Steve Rogers that we, for the most part, know and love. Because remember, when the whole origin of Hydra Captain America was being rewritten, this was basically removed. And instead, he was brought up and he was trained by Hydra. And so again, these are two completely different origins for these different characters. And that's how we differentiate between the two. Now, at this point, again, we basically jump over to the idea of Peter Quill. And this is kind of funny because remember, with Captain America Steve Rogers, I guess with Hydra Captain America going through and initiating the shield that's capable of blocking out virtually any threat, the shield itself took into account virtually every force that the Earth had ever come across, Galactus, these various alien races, so on and so forth. And so it made sense that they would create a shield that would be designed to withstand those forces. Of what use would it be to make a shield to protect the Earth if they didn't take into account people with almost godlike levels of power that should be able to get through it? But with Peter Quill and the Guardians of the Galaxy, or at least Peter Quill, Rocket Raccoon, and Groot going out and trying to basically find people they can rally to their cause, what this does is it brings in the perception of Earth with regard to the rest of the universe. Now again, this is not new. The Earth has always been viewed as a place that the other alien races across the universe absolutely hate. That goes all the way back to the Chris Claremont era of the X-Men back in the 1970s and 1980s. It's always been that way. The Earth basically houses these superheroes, some of which have insane levels of power, but the Earth never really takes into account how their actions affect the rest of the universe. And so again, because of this, it's always one of these things where the Earth's battles, the Earth's problems, ultimately spill out onto the rest of the universe, and all these other different alien races either have to play mop-up duty, or they have to try to basically run and flee for their lives in order to avoid everything that the Earth is screwing up. So again, this unfolds exactly as we would expect when Peter Quill basically says, hey look, here's everything that's going on. Captain America basically turned out to be a bad guy. He seized control of the United States. He created this giant shield around the Earth. We need your help in order to basically try to find a way to take down the shield, whether it's using your technology or whatever the case may be. And they all say no. And not only do they say no, they all start attacking Peter Quill, because again, it's their chance to basically take the Earth down, to keep it isolated, because that's the nature of this. Peter Quill is basically making the argument and saying, hey look, this won't stop here. Like Hydra Captain America, they're going to start turning their attention to all of you. Now keep in mind, for the most part, all of these races have all manner of technology that could easily be used to basically destroy Hydra. But at the same time, Captain America has some pretty formidable heroes on his side as the head of Hydra. Not all of them are there because they want to be, but regardless of their motivations, they are fighting on his side. And so again, it's really kind of a cool scenario, because it brings in this question of how far is Hydra Captain America really willing to go in order to ensure that he can basically bring peace to Earth and then eventually the universe. Now, at this point, we switch over to a guy by the name of Frederick. And Frederick is not very relevant at all. Frederick Myers is a guy that goes by the name of Boomerang, and he's literally like Captain Boomerang from DC Comics, except a lot less interesting. What it's designed to be is it's basically here to show us this is very much like the Old Man Logan story. Remember, in the Old Man Logan story, all the Earth superheroes died, and villains who would have normally had no real role in society whatsoever suddenly found themselves rising up and carving out these little niches for themselves where they can have their own little, quote-unquote empires. Hydra doesn't really care what goes on the ground level. Hydra's out up in the sky, they're up in the clouds. So long as they maintain their control, they don't really care what happens on the surface. And that's what's going on here. With guys like Frederick Myers, this is a small-time criminal who managed to basically kind of wheedle his way into this huge amount of success just because of the fact that there's really no superheroes that are willing to step out and fight anymore, because either they're being rounded up by Hydra or they're just being killed on sight. And so it gives him this chance to basically carve out his own little niche. Now, him meeting with Natasha Romanoff with Black Widow is actually designed to orchestrate a meetup between Black Widow and somebody else. And this person is revealed to be Maria Hill. Now, something that I want you guys to notice, for a lot of you guys who are not familiar with Marvel Comics, this is one of those Nick Fury moments. If you've been reading Marvel Comics for a long time, you know that, like, the original Nick Fury, before he became, like, the Unseen, the old school Nick Fury, the white guy with the eye patch and so on and so forth, he was one of these guys where he was always, like, the last man standing. If everything went to pot, Nick Fury had all these bunkers stationed all around the world, and he would just go there, he would gather intel, he would wait it out, he would do whatever it was that he needed to do. Maria Hill is much the same way. Maria Hill is a character who basically found her huge claim to fame when she became director of S.H.I.E.L.D. prior to and was director during the events of Marvel's original Civil War story. Everybody hated her. Like, people hated Maria Hill during Civil War. People were just like, God, man, I wish Maria Hill would die. But that was a testament to how well her character was written. But she basically stayed director of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a little while. After Civil War was over, Tony Stark became director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Eventually, he was removed. Norman Osborn became director. Then he was removed. And then Maria Hill took his place. And then, of course, this led into All New, All Different Marvel with Hydra Captain America orchestrating things behind the scenes so that Maria Hill would be ousted and then he would take her place and then initiate his whole plan to take over the United States. But she's always been one of these characters that's very Nick Fury-esque in terms of how she functions and how she operates. She's able to use what little intel she has at her disposal in order to basically grab the calendar of Steve Rogers. Now, on the surface, it seems totally irrelevant, but the reason why this is important is because of the fact we actually jump over to Steve Rogers while he's speaking with the members of Hydra's council. These members of Hydra's council represent different aspects. Some are in charge of social media, some are in charge of the military, but the idea here is that Steve Rogers is still on the hunt for the shards of the cosmic cube. Remember, those were destroyed. It's really the only way to basically fix everything and set things back to the way they're supposed to be. We end up finding out that one of the shards resides in Atlantis, so that's why this is all happening, is because with the calendar of Hydra Captain America, effectively the former Avengers, that's what we want to call them, basically know exactly where he's going to be at any given time during the day. And so they know exactly where he's going, what he's going to be searching for, the whole 9 yards. And this is actually going to allow both teams to converge and encounter one another during the next issue, which is actually going to be kind of cool. But the other thing about this is that, remember, Namor the Submariner is hiding to a degree. He's trying to marshal his forces. While they're going around and capturing these shards of the cosmic cube, Arnim Zola tried to invade Wakanda and was almost immediately repelled. Black Panther waged absolute pandemonium against them. With regards to Namor the Submariner, while the forces of Baron Zemo and those guys are trying to get in there, ultimately it's always just backing up. It's always running off, hiding, whatever the case may be. Because remember, Atlantis is very much this uncharted place of Earth in the Marvel Universe. Really, only Namor the Submariner knows the most about it, just because of the fact that he kept it so secret and would so often refuse to allow anybody to get down there. And so this, of course, results in Hydra Captain America saying, fine, if he wants to run and hide, then we'll take away his places to hide, and they just bombard Atlantis with nothing but just rockets and these different weapons. So again, where the question is asked whether or not they need to follow up with the next location, quote unquote. Of course, Hydra Captain America's response is, no, I will take care of this on my own, only for us to find out that this location is the current residence of Ultron in All New, All Different Marvel. So again, they're all basically going to be meeting up with Ultron in the next story. At this point, I want to kind of backtrack for a second, and I want to pick up with Sam Wilson, because remember, Sam Wilson was the all-new Captain America, but following Steve Rogers' rise and the reveal that he was a Hydra agent, Sam Wilson basically quit. Plus, it was also just the fact that people were giving him a hard time after a while. So this is one of those situations where he just says, you know what, I'm effectively done. And he currently operates as a smuggler, getting people out of the United States to territories that are still considered to be free. But notice is that he points out the fact to everybody else. He says, hey, I don't know if you guys noticed, but no one's out fighting in the streets. There's no revolutionary fighters anymore. People have effectively given up. And so again, it's one of these funny situations where it's like, if people really care that much about their freedom, they would fight for it to the bitter end. The fact that they're not fighting for it means they don't care that much about it. And if they don't care that much about it, then their current situation is what they deserve to have, because they're just rolling over. Otherwise, they would be fighting against it. People don't really care about who it is that's running the show, so long as things aren't bad for them. And that's not an unreasonable expectation. It's not an unreasonable stance. So long as they can put food on the table for their kids, so long as people are being rounded up, but it's not them, well then suddenly then it's not a great big huge deal. So again, it's one of these crazy things where it's like people sort of, stick their head in the ground, ignoring the situation getting worse and worse. And then one day they're going to wake up and just realize that their life's about as terrible as it's going to be because Hydra Captain America made things a lot worse than they could have been. Now, following up with Sam Wilson as he's leading the various, members of Tony Stark, or I guess hologram Tony Stark and these other Avengers revolutionaries out to Brazil where Ultron's going to be. Now, again, for the most part, not all of them know this is going to be the case. But what we end up doing here is we actually jump back to Frederick Myers for the last tail bit of this story. And this is really, really cool because Frederick Myers, the guy who orchestrated this meeting between Maria Hill and Natasha Romanoff, gets up to go to the bathroom only to find out that there's a mine planted against the window, or I guess against the glass. The mine goes off. And the question is, once he's set upon by whoever it was that planted this mine, his question is, who are you? What do you want? This guy's response is the best way to end a story ever. He says, I could be any number of things. Vengeance, terror, terrible and swift. I could be the guy that could bring everything that you love crashing down around you. I'm the guy who could end your life in a heartbeat. I could be your punishment. And then Frank Castle, the Punisher, says, "Hail Hydra." I told you this is going to be a cliffhanger. I'll be honest. I love seeing your all's reactions to cliffhangers. I love seeing how you guys react to things because you all usually freak out. You all are usually like, no! But if you thought the cliffhangers that I left you on so far were bad, wait till we get to the end of this video. Because this cliffhanger is nuts. So here's the deal. If you're just now joining us with Secret Empire, there have been a couple of things that have happened so far. The long and short of this is that the cosmic cube that was used to basically alter Steve Rogers' memories, to make him into a Hydra agent, to basically alter his past, the fragments have been redistributed and just split throughout the rest of the world. And no one really knows exactly where they are. At this point, it is Tony Stark's Rebel team and Captain America's Hydra team trying to track down these fragments. Of course, they have different motivations as to why. Captain America wants to track down the fragments and basically restore the cosmic cube so he can alter all of reality and basically recreate the universe in the image of Hydra. Tony Stark wants to go through and use the cosmic cube to basically fix everything and undo Hydra's rule. So it's pretty simple in terms of how it unfolds. But what we end up doing here is we again pick up with the vanishing point. Now remember, the vanishing point is a story that we don't know anything about. We have no idea what this is. All we know is that it's just some place that we just picked up with at some point along the line. But what threw everybody off is that where the entire run of All New, All Different Marvel basically told us that Steve Rogers, Captain America, as we traditionally think of him, had his history altered to make him a Hydra agent.
He's guy?
Mad isn't the word I'd use.
Hey, you gotta admit, though, I paid you back in thrills. How many slubs get on the Haxian Brood's most wanted list, huh?
If you weren't such a good pilot, I'd hand you over myself.
Better keep your skills up, Greasy. I could use some help out there if you want to join me.
What? Why would I ever do that? No, I'm not going out there. What do you want, Cal?
Nothing. Just kidding.
Well, I'm glad my fear of a painful death by zombie witches makes you a little bit more at ease. Now hurry up and let's get out of here.
That's not moving.
What's that? I'm after him.
Master.
You were wrong to return here unarmed.
Not unarmed.
You think that lightsaber proves you a Jedi?
No. Facing you. Memories that have haunted me since Braca. I won't run from them anymore.
Then let us see what manner of death your courage brings. If you cannot surpass my teaching, then you will die here. Impressive. But is power the answer?
Master. I will never forget. The loss has become a part of me. I will honor your teaching and your sacrifice.
Remember, persistence reveals the path.
Brothers, here! Jedi, please, for us.
Jedi coward!
Not so bad. I struck the Jedi. Come, brothers.
Don't lose sight of him. I'll thrash you. Where is your skill? Sturms!
I will not fall.
You chose to return. Brave, but not wise.
Maybe. Marin, right? I'm Cal Kestis. What you were told about the Jedi was not true.
So you say. Cal. Malikos said many things too.
Terran Malicos might have been part of my order, but what he is now, I have no idea. All I do know is having a lightsaber isn't what makes you a Jedi.
Then what does?
We were peacekeepers. We were betrayed by those we protected. Hunted down by the Empire. I might be one of the last of my kind.
I was only a child when they attacked. An armored warrior brandishing this descended upon us and cut down my people, my sisters, until I was left alone with the dead. Then Malikos came and promised me revenge if I shared our secrets with him in return.
I know what it's like to lose everything. And Malicos was wrong to use that against you. We don't have to be enemies.
You will need this.
There she goes again.
I'll be watching.
Let's get out of here.
Malikos lies ahead. You could turn back.
I can't. Lives are at stake.
Whose lives?
Innocents. 4 sensitive children who will be hunted down and murdered.
As we were.
My friend, I have never been one to shy away from the pursuit of knowledge.
Something terrible happened here. A massacre. They killed their own kind. The promises of power.
Kestis,
Malicos.
welcome home. Here to begin your training. What in these ruins tempts you so much to risk death?
I could ask you the same thing.
There is power there, beyond Jedi understanding. Power I control. I would offer you the same thing.
Don't you understand? I'm not interested in power. I want to restore the Order.
Restore the Jedi Order. Oh, you poor fool. It's over! Jedi fell long before the Purge. It was stifled by tradition. Deafened by our past glories. Blinded by endless war.
Maybe. But it's never over, Malicos. We stand here now, with the chance to learn. To rebuild from our mistakes.
Jedi learn. There's no future for them. Why can you not see that? It's time for something new. You and me. We could build something different. Something better.
No.
And Dathomir will be your grave. You shall not hit me! I hardly felt that. You cannot avoid death forever. Come on!
I need something, buddy.
Only cowards run. You're wretched.
Please! Stop this nonsense, trespasser! Avenge them! You won't win, Jedi!
You're wretched. Dodging won't save you. I hardly felt that. You lack finesse. Oh, you're a quick one.
Toss me one, BD.
Up there! Think you can match me? Hey, outsider! Stop running!
Come on! You are not powerful enough. I hardly felt that. Oh, you're a quick one. Back, Jedi!
Help, BD!
Thwarted my attack.
BD, stim here!
See, Padawan, I have focus. Only cowards run. That was nothing. Come! Kill me if you dare!
Look there! Look, think you can match me? Put me here! I will stop this brutality!
Come! Kill me if you dare! You lack finesse. Oh, you're a quick one. Try that again. You see, Padawan, I have focus.
Blocking won't help. Come on! You shall not hit me! Dodging won't save you.
Up there! Move it!
Prepare to die, outsider. Back, Jedi!
Get the intruder! He shakes in fear. Enough running! Kill me! What? You cannot break me! You don't have a mere thirst for your blood! Come on! Oh, you're a quick one. Strike me down!
I need something, buddy.
That was nothing. Not too slow for me. Look, here! Your defeat is assured. Pay for the Jedi's sins. This will not stop me. I'll end this quick. Weakling Jedi.